This is Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan, and it's the front line of a vicious guerrilla war between Taliban insurgents and 50,000 Western troops. Suicide bombing has quickly become the key battlefield weapon. Western forces have developed a whole range of anti-suicide bomber tactics. Before 2003, suicide bomb attacks were unknown in Afghanistan, despite a decade of war against the occupying Soviet army. Mullah Rakati is a former senior Taliban commander, but now supports the pro-Western Afghan government.
This technique is something new that has come to Afghanistan from other countries, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. From the beginning, I didn't think these suicide attacks were right, because of two reasons. Because innocent people are dying, and for the bomber himself, this way of dying is not correct. I oppose these acts.
For the Taliban leadership, suicide bombing is cheap and effective. There has been a gallery of bombers with suicide vests, bombers on bicycles, and bombers in cars. In this propaganda video, a Taliban leader pretends to check off the names of hundreds of future would-be martyrs, but the video is not a lie. There is a huge potential pool of recruits from madrasas, religious schools, in the lawless border regions of Pakistan and Afghanistan. Since 2003, there have been over 250 attacks. Nowhere in Afghanistan is now safe from the threat of suicide bombers. I am just on the outskirts of Kabul, close to one of the main UK military bases. There's just been a suicide bombing, an attack on a British patrol, right over this ridge behind the truck. It was following the convoy. Somebody detonated. There's been at least a couple injured. The British Army is keeping bystanders away. What they're worried about is a secondary attack. And that's why these guys are locked and loaded up there, ready to shoot at anybody who gets close. The British troops survived only because they were driving heavily armored vehicles. And the soldiers were lucky. Armored cars are a defensive strategy. If you are attacked, and if the suicide bomb is small enough, then you'll survive. But you can't be lucky all the time. And the bigger the bomb, then the slimmer your chances of survival. Somebody on a motorbike came up, and fortunately wasn't alongside, but was on the rear and initiated the explosive. And this is the damage you see. If it hadn't been a protected car, armored car, everybody would have been killed in it. For every successful suicide bomb attack, there are many failures. And through intelligence contacts, I went to meet two failed Afghan suicide bombers at a secret interrogation center in Kabul. Farmanullah and Abdul Qaddus are both 17. Their mission was to blow up a local Afghan governor. This was the vest?
Yes.
And where was the explosive?
From here and here.
And where was the electric wires?
They take the battery and the buttons go from here.
Tell me about Paradise. Tell me your story. What happened? Why are you here?
Taliban came to our school and said jihad was compulsory. If you go on jihad, there will be paradise and versions. If you don't, you go to hell.
And you wanted to kill the governor?
Yes.
And why did you want to kill the governor?
I was told he was an infidel and worked for the Americans.
Were you promised anything after your suicide bombing?
After you leave the door with your suicide vest bomb, God Himself will do everything else. Even before you blow yourself up, Virgins come to the site of the explosion and wait for you to take you to paradise.
Do you hate foreigners?
I was told they are killing innocent Muslims and insulting Muslim women.
You were going to wear the suicide vest, and then Abu Qudus was going to push the button.
No, not Abdul Qudus. You just pull this thing, then God will make it happen.
God was actually going to ignite the suicide vest.
Yes, I was told that God himself will detonate it.
God himself to blow up your suicide bomb vest? I'm sure the initiator was more likely to be a high-frequency radio signal. Farman is just the latest development in the cult of the suicide bomber, the remotely detonated human bomb. Those suicide bombers today were some of the most innocent pairs I've ever met. They were schoolboys. Their parents didn't know, their family didn't know, and yet they were susceptible to this ideology. Hikmat Karzai is an expert on the indoctrination techniques used on Afghan suicide bombers.
When you come to Afghanistan, you find individuals that are completely brainwashed. The particular connection is the madrasas that are in Pakistan and their particular networks, whether it's Al-Qaeda network, whether these are particular jihadist groups operating in Pakistan. They don't teach them anything else besides jihad. This becomes their keen obligation as a Muslim to go out and do a jihad.
In the cult of the suicide bomber, the key concept is not martyrdom, but jihad, struggle. In the Quran, there are different interpretations of this Islamic concept, some personal, some political. But Osama bin Laden's and the Taliban's jihad is derived from just one Quranic verse, justifying war against those who attack Muslim lands. For this defensive jihad to be invoked, the West must first be defined as the aggressor. Fighting the invaders, crusaders, becomes therefore a religious obligation on all Muslims, a holy war.
For centuries, the enemies of this believing nation have successfully implemented their anti-Islam, anti-Muslim designs. And our Sharia commands us to liberate every handstand of Islamic land occupied by the unbelievers, that the only way to deal with them when they refuse to leave of their own accord is to expel them by force.
Indoctrinated by this Taliban propaganda, the boys believed they were fighting a righteous war, a holy jihad, against foreign invaders in Afghanistan. Are there any lessons that you've learned here in Afghanistan that could be applied to Britain?
If you have certain religious clerics in the UK, I think if they come out very openly and reject a lot of these acts, reject a lot of this ideological behavior, I think you have lots of success.